Hello, everybody, and welcome to your post-daily news show for Tuesday, February the 15th. It's Vengeance Day.
Oh, boy. And is it? Yeah, wow.
Nothing bigger way because everything is focused tonight on Rhodes. It is the finals of the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic. A trophy will be presented tonight, but we have lots to discuss on today's show. Obviously, the biggest story going on in professional wrestling today, that is Cody and Brandi Rhodes departing All Elite Wrestling, with all of the key parties issuing statements right around 10 a.m. Eastern this morning. We had a statement from Cody, a separate one from Brandi, and then Tony Khan putting out a statement on AEW's social platforms. I'm just going to read from Tony Khan's one. Cody and Brandi Rhodes were integral to the launch of All Elite Wrestling. Cody's ability, combined with his boldness and his passion for our industry and his love for community outreach, helped AEW deliver on our mission to give fans what they needed for far too long, something new, innovative, and lasting. Brandi helped us shape the AEW story, and I appreciate how hard she fought for us both in the ring and out of the ring, competing in the women's division while advancing our efforts at inclusion and civic causes, including great partnerships with Culture City and the American Heart Association. I have immense respect and appreciation for Cody and Brandi, and I wish them both the best as they move on from AEW. Thank you, Cody and Brandi. That's signed by Tony Khan. So there are just way too many repercussions of this story, and we thought it would be pertinent to bring in the host of Wrestlenomics Radio to join in on this this huge discussion, and that is Brandon Thurston, who joins us from the Wrestlenomics mobile studio. Hello, yes, Brandon.
How are you? Thank you for having me. I'm not in my tie today, so there's been breaking news.
That's right. Yes. A clear sign of the importance of such a story. So, we had seen it was first reported by Sean Ross Sapp that Cody's contract had come to an end in AEW. He still had the TNT Championship at the time, and then they did the match with Sammy Guevara, and kind of ended with an interview that they put online of Cody basically stating, "This is real. I do not have a contract, and I honestly do not know what is next." And this looked to be the finality to this story, at least this chapter of it, the departures of Cody and Brandi from the promotion. So what were your immediate takeaways just seeing this statement in and of itself, and the fact that it reached this level that two of the key building blocks of the company are leaving?
In a sense, it's surprising. In another sense, if anybody was going to go from AEW to WWE, Cody's and Brandi are among the first that would come to mind. I had thought a few weeks ago when Cody had done that long rambling live promo on Dynamite that, well, they probably had an agreement in principle, was my guess. But apparently not. There was no agreement, and we found out today that they're leaving. I've been assured that this is not a work for anybody who still has their doubts, that this is real, that they are really leaving. There were plans for Brandi Rhodes and Paige Van Zant to have a match on the Revolution pay-per-view. And I saw the tweet from Dave Meltzer just a little while ago that he's basically indicating that there's no non-compete issue that would stand in the way of at least Cody appearing anywhere immediately.
Yeah, let's read these from Dave Meltzer. This was about an hour ago. He wrote that the Cody-Brandi split with AEW happened yesterday. The two sides didn't come to terms on a new deal after 6 weeks. There's a lot more to read into this, and our show last night talked about the different issues, but he could legally be on WWE TV at any time. And he went on to write that yesterday on the Cody situation, the lawyers were involved and they agreed to part ways. And yes, obviously, it's an enormous story. And one that I think when everyone first heard the news of his contract status with AEW, I think it was an idea that, okay, maybe there are some, differences in certain elements to the deal, but there's just too much invested in both of them. Like, they had just announced this deal with this partnership with the American Heart Association, and that Brandi had really been the face of. And Cody, I mean, it goes without stating, his investment with both of them, with Rhodes to the Top on Go Big Show, that I would say from a perception standpoint, Brandon, like, they had a lot of leverage here. They opted to use it. And I think that this, certainly you have to look at the network level of how this is viewed when you have a second season of Rhodes to the Top, when you have someone that this network has invested in, and now all of a sudden he's going to the other competitor.
Yeah, there's more questions than answers, but as you mentioned, Road to the Top was renewed. That was announced in November. There's supposed to be a second season of that. What's going to happen now? That wasn't just a project that TNT was doing or that Warner Media was doing and that they were casting Cody and Brandi for. That was an AEW show. So I would guess that it's certainly not going to be Roads to the Top, and maybe there's some other kind of reality show that they put in its place. So I can't imagine that show continuing on with Cody and Brandi as the key figures there.
Roads to Connecticut.
Yeah, really. So we'll see. I would expect him to appear in WWE. Maybe sooner rather than later. It leaves a lot of questions about how will a wrestler who was integral to the founding of AEW, who was not just one of their major stars, but was one of the founding stars along with the other executive vice presidents and Tony Khan, how will somebody like that be treated in the creative in WWE? We saw how Cody Rhodes' father was created as somebody who was jumping from the NWA, from Jim Crockett Promotions to the WF in 89 or 90. And was dressed in yellow polka dots and was made kind of a caricature out of. Will Cody Rhodes be given similar treatment? It will be fascinating to see, although obviously Cody Rhodes has a history of being with WWE before this. It's really a fascinating story. He's been a really intriguing character, Cody has, over the last several years, from him being among the first to request the release from WWE, following a long list of people who would. And he had that very memorable tweet. The list of wrestlers who he wanted to work with was a great marketing tool. He was not somebody, when he left WWE, who I think the hardcore critical fans were excited to see outside of WWE necessarily, but he earned that fan base's respect. That you could think of that fan base as sort of being the proto AEW audience. He earned their respect on the Indies and in Ring of Honor. And I was there live at All In, and I think you guys were too, in Chicago. And there was nobody who was more over than Cody Rhodes was on that night to this hardest of the hardcore group of fans. And as of late, though, the crowd has turned on him and on Brandi if they ever were behind her. And he doesn't want to turn heel, apparently. And it's sort of becoming a John Cena Roman Reigns situation. I wonder how much creative disagreements might have played into this, but yeah, it's been a hate and love and hate relationship back and forth between Cody and the fans. So yeah, one thing I'm sure of though is that MJF will find a way to get heat off of this news story. I'm sure.
Yeah, I think certainly that this it's very interesting to see how obviously this went out on their social channels today of whether this is in any way addressed on the show, even in a Tony Khan, much like when Randy Savage left WWF and Vince McMahon did that on camera, which was a very heartfelt statement, and then later would never do business with Randy Savage, but nonetheless getting kind of like an on air goodbye to Cody and Brandi. I think that's kind of interesting on Wednesday night. I'll let you jump in here, Wai, because as Brandon kind of outlined, where the on-screen portrayals of Cody and Brandi had gone, I think it's very easy to look at these two as the most polarizing characters on the show, and it had kind of elicited this reaction that I don't know if it's necessarily where a lot of the audience want to see this go. It seemed like they were inviting the audience to go against these characters, and there were some that were very much in favor of it, but many who pushed back at. Do you think there is any the removal of these characters, what impact that has on the AEW product?
Yeah, well, I think we can at least take a step back and about this Cody Rhodes tweener story and really collectively ask, what the hell? What was it all for? What did they have planned that didn't ultimately come to fruition because of this? Were they in a bit of a holding pattern this entire time and not wanting to commit one way or the other to a big match for Cody down the road? Therefore, no definitive direction about whether or not he should be a heel or babyface. I don't know, but I mean, just as we were left with every single week after one of these Cody promos, the question is, what was that? And also, I can't wait to talk about it, because no matter what, this man is, has become really quite the expert at making headlines over the past, better part of the past year, and continues to do so with very bold moves like this. I could tell you this was not something I expected, and even up until these particular moments, like, I don't know if I'm fully like comprehending as the truth. But as far as impact to AEW's own roster, I don't think it hurts them. I mean, there is the perception that all the talent has been swinging one way at this point, and certainly to lose somebody who's one of your, arguably the most core of your founding members to the competition is, I guess, a big PR blow. But one of the biggest problems with AEW has been an oversaturation of talent, and this just makes room for, people like a Ricky Starks or, a Keith Lee or a Malachi Black or a Miro to, like, go up and get some of that airtime and get some of those spots. So I don't think, in fact, in some ways, I think it could actually improve AEW. I don't think it really hurts them talent-wise.
I think the more interesting question, Brandon, comes at the network level, at the Warner Media level, of just if there is the perception there that, the guy we sort of isolated to take and move into these other projects, it's like he gained this notoriety on our media, and the perceived big leagues came and just grabbed this guy and took him away. Like, if that perception is widespread, I can see that being like egg on the face of AEW, like why you could not hold on to this person that was someone we had invested in, that you had invested in, and was a major player. Like, Cody Rhodes and AEW were intrinsically linked since the launch of this company.
Yeah, I can see it being viewed as a net positive on the creative level or on the talent level, considering the dynamic that they had with fans of late. But from a network perspective, as you said, it could be an issue. I could see Warner Media / Turner not being happy about this, sort of getting the rug pulled out from under them, at least as far as the Roads to the Top and Cody's presence on Go Big Show. Will that continue? Will that be allowed to continue if he's with WWE rather than AEW?
And not having Cody to promote it on your, like, here you have
right.
your 3 hours of programming on TNT and TBS, and the central figure is not going to be able to be on the audience you would be most assuming would be crossing over to watch him there.
And that's an important thing. Your viewership is important. What you can get for ad rates is important, but what a network also values is, does us having your product, airing Dynamite, Rampage on our networks, does that help us drive viewership to other programs, including Go Big Show, including Roads to the Top, including, we had Jericho follow on Fast Foodies on Rampage the other week. So that's really important. And is AEW able to replace those, that deal with anybody else or with any other kind of show? It just, like I said, it leaves a lot of questions about what's the future of Roads to the Top. Is that going to be replaced with anything, or is it just going to be lost? And we'll see what happens in the future. If somebody else is going to be on, I think maybe Paul White finally gets to be on Go Big Show, but that's a real story, and the network may not be happy about this today.
Wait, as you look at it, and I think like I cannot say I cannot confirm like pen to paper on Cody in WWE, but I think you would be naive to think that he's not making a massive move like this without a plan, a landing spot, and probably like a very significant deal. And typically when you look at people with big time deals in WWE, that's going to dictate kind of how you are utilized. But Cody, this version of Cody, this was not a WWE creation. He left as someone that did not reach his self-intended, his high ceiling in WWE. Went out and reinvented himself, and now comes back as a major star. Would you expect that he is booked as a big star and coming back into the company with that perception?
If he is probably garnering the amount that we could speculate that he would be, I think, coming off of the buzz on the internet that he's getting right now, I would think at the very least to start, he would get a pretty good position, maybe as early as WrestleMania, right? How long that sustains itself, I think, is anybody's guess. We've seen layups and slam dunks. And we've also seen the vengeful mind of Vince McMahon. You know, anytime somebody tries to go against him, and how he likes to treat some of those talents. So I think it's anybody's guess. I can tell you from a personal standpoint, I don't see it being better than what he had. I just really don't, because I don't think physically he is the type of talent that Vince McMahon has always wanted. If he was, then he would have been pushed way back when. You know, is he the level of is he like, you know, even somebody who he sees on the level Vince sees on the level of like a Seth Rollins, or the Miz, even? You know, it really kind of makes you wonder. Like, has Cody shown something to Vince in these few years that made Vince, you know, fall in love with him suddenly and want to sustain a push beyond just this initial period of interest coming off of this AEW war?
Vince would have to be watching.
He would have to be watching, first of all, exactly, because like otherwise he just sees Stardust. You know, he just sees dashing Cody Rhodes. You know, I'm sure he's happy to have him back in the fold. Like there's a whole lot of stuff, I guess, with the Dusty Cup that they could do, or anything involving his father's legacy. But as far as a sustained push for him and Brandi, I'm not as optimistic.
Perception wise, it's a coup. It's a coup for WWE, I think, to do this. Like, this will be, I think, a story that goes much beyond just being like a wrestling story. It's like the face of this upstart going to WWE. Like, from a perception standpoint, I think that's, you know, an immediate positive for WWE. But we're also going to see Brandon, like, someone like, and only Cody can really answer this, of someone who was so involved in the AEW product on so many different levels, from behind the scenes to being a spokesperson for the company to being involved in creative, in all these different aspects. And if he is just going to WWE, it's like Kenny Omega talked about this when his contract was up, the idea that, yeah, I could kind of just turn my brain off and go to WWE and just be a wrestler, and that might be fulfilling for some people, and for others that would be very frustrating for others when you have had just a degree of autonomy in an AEW that, you know, historically in WWE you're not going to be going in there and necessarily having, you know, any percentage of that kind of power where you are just going under a wrestler deal.
I would think so. It's not been clear to me what the executive vice presidents in AEW, we're talking about the Young Bucks, Kenny. I gather that Kenny is very involved with the women's wrestling scene in AEW. I'm not sure what Cody and the Young Bucks have really been doing as far as their corporate employee roles. That's not been clear to me. Apparently, at the beginning of the Dynamite run, there was more of a collaborative effort in creative, but following about December 2019 or so, I've got the impression that Tony Khan took over and is the one booker now. So I'm sure Cody was a locker room leader and was a very important figure in their locker room. I'm not sure what he was doing as an executive vice president. But yeah, if I'm going to WWE, I mean, I could see them thinking that they'll be different. You know, a lot of talent has a lot of confidence, and that's part of what helps them succeed. But I don't see any reason to expect that they'd be treated any differently than any of the other talent that has, in my opinion, been misused and squandered. And you've got working against Cody that, you know, he might be made an example of. Yet, on the other hand, I could see it's a good PR story, or it's a good story that WWE could tell partners or investors who are asking questions about this new competitor, AEW, and why are we seeing a lot of your talent leave WWE and go to AEW, and why are we seeing some metrics get competitive with WWE? You can now tell this story that, hey, look, it goes both ways. We took one of their biggest stars, and actually we created this star, and now he's with us again, and now he's doing great things. Whether or not he is, I mean, business partners and investors aren't going to look that deeply into it, but they can tell this story, and that's an important thing to them. And you know, this is a company that thrives on that more so than building a fan base at this point.
Wait, could you?
Before
go
we
ahead with your
continue,
question.
thank you to everybody joining us for the live room right now. We're almost up to 450 people watching us live, which is triple the most we've ever had. But Kate actually brings up a really interesting point. The larger risk to AEW is that Cody could tempt other talents to come with him, and of course that is one of Cody Rhodes' main benefits to AEW. The fact that he's managed to cultivate so many personal relationships, and names it himself in his statement here. People he considers his kiddos. In the future, having that direct connection line to somebody who could potentially be in a position in the WWE, is that a risk to AEW?
I think you have to look at Cody, and again, this is really in what kind of a deal is he coming in, and if it is strictly as a wrestler, then I don't know if that's going to hold a lot of water. But I think we have enough months, Brandon, to look at this NXT 2.0 model that is not gotten off to anywhere near the degree that I think they have hoped for, and is the idea of Cody doing more than just wrestling, of having, there aren't too many, young wrestling minds that are put in any kind of positions of power in this company that even in some kind of role, would that be enticing enough for Cody to come in and there's something beyond just a strict in-ring wrestling portion?
I'm sure that would be enticing to him. And if you look at NXT 2.0, you can look at it as well. Triple H has fallen out of favor apparently, and his whole vision was rehauled and rebranded. I don't know who's really leading the creative side of NXT at this point. I think there's a name, Johnny Russo, who's the head writer of NXT, but is it Bruce Pritchard who's really overseeing things? How involved is Vince really? Maybe there's a vacancy there that Cody feels that he can step in and assume. The impression that I get from WWE at this point, though, is that the people who are climbing the ladder of late, who are winning the political battles, are the people who are most serving the vision of Vince McMahon and what he wants and what his preferences are. The content and the creative around Cody Rhodes over the last few years since he's left WWE, whether it was what happened around him, the NWA title, it all in, or what's happened with him creatively in AEW, that doesn't seem to me like a creative vision that meshes well with Vince's creative vision. So I guess it's a question of if that's part of what is attracting him to WWE, that is possibly getting involved in some sort of office role or some sort of behind-the-scenes role, leadership role, that I don't see his vision gelling well with Vince's, unless, or maybe he's just he'll be willing to apply Vince's vision. But it's probably not as simple as that. I would see him, you can tell yourself a story about why you're doing something sometimes, but I think, I don't expect that to go as well as he might be imagining, but who knows?
Wai, as we move on after this, what do you see as how best to introduce a Cody Rhodes? Like if you're looking at WrestleMania, he easily becomes like a standout attraction for that particular set of shows. And I mean, do you expect this is going to be very quick that we see him on programming?
I do. I mean, the news has really hit pretty fast, and the timing is actually quite perfect for something at WrestleMania, of course. Even, immediately after this Elimination Chamber, coming back to the next episode of Raw, everybody is talking about it, and what a great way to, if what Dave says is true, and he doesn't have a non-compete. You put that guy on TV immediately. Put him on. Well, they can't do Friday, of course, but the soonest opportunity, and which would, I guess it could be Saturday, but I don't know if it makes a big difference Saturday or the Monday, but you build them up towards this WrestleMania cycle, and for the love of God, please try to keep the man special and don't give us, some backstage skit of him reading some sort of play. I don't want him in the toga party.
No, face mask. He's going to have a face mask with Sheamus and Ridge Holland, and it's going to be dashing to WrestleMania for the stupendous return of Cody Rhodes.
It is so incredibly rare that we are talking about the potential for a WWE story to feel authentic and to feel real and to feel like there's some real heat behind it. So I would let Cody Rhodes come out on Monday, cut that promo. Like, have him. He's not gonna speak ill of AEW, but at least have him come and talk about what he did manage to create. Let a revolution outside of this thing. Let the thing feel real, and put him in the mix with your other participants and other wrestlers who are also of that similar promo ability, that also are able to feel very real. And like, everybody seems to be tied up for Mania right now, but they could find somebody to tell us a compelling story. They got 2 nights.
That is the compelling story. That is the money promo way. I cannot fathom AEW even being hinted at in Cody's return. I really just.
What is the point then? What is the point of bringing him back?
I cannot imagine them making AEW such a
But
acknowledging number 2. I just think on their own television, I just have a hard time imagining that way. And we have seen enough instances of this. Like, what was the easiest way to book Ric Flair when he first came to the WWF? And it was like our blurred title. And it was just, I just think that is ingrained in Vince McMahon, that I would be pleasantly surprised if they went that route.
So you're essentially just grabbing him so that the competition can't have him.
Yes.
And you're bringing back another generic wrestler.
Yes. Am I being too pessimistic, Brandon?
I think that's how Vince will play it. Like, Vince is not watching AEW. Vince is not, and if he is, he's I'm sure he's aware to some extent of what Cody's been up to. But if Cody is perceived as being a bigger star now that he's left WWE, which in, I think, the average fan's view, I think absolutely he is, Vince doesn't tend to like it when you've become a star outside of his reach, and you probably get punished for that. Or at least we show that our wrestlers are really the major league, and you're in the middle maybe. No,
and it's almost inevitable, sorry to interrupt, but it's almost inevitable that first appearance will elicit AEW chants from whatever arena they're in. And I think there will be I think that will be a negative in terms of how it's interpreted from the company of getting AEW chants from this crowd. And I think the idea of fighting that rather than embracing that, and what people are most intrigued with this character on WWE programming.
But this is a positive for WWE. This is where a chance for them to brag about having won over AEW. It's not necessarily something that is to promote even a rivalry. It's almost to say, hey, we got their general in this war.
How was Eric Bischoff handled when he was brought in? Like, I can just go through so many of these names where it's like it writes itself about how you bring in somebody and for maximum value. And instead it was like that. Go watch that very first promo Eric Bischoff cuts coming in, and it's like, we got beat. If only we could have got Hunter, we could have won the Monday Night War. It's just like,
there was at least reference made to it. You're telling me they can't tell a compelling story with what's going on right now with his real life, former job?
Compelling story? No. I can virtually tell you that I think compelling story, no. A story, yes. A compelling one, I would love to be wrong, but I'm not going into this.
They can, but I do not expect it. I expect something more along the lines of Dusty Rhodes, digging up horse manure, or Goldberg wearing the wig, or the Rock cutting a promo on Booker T with Booker T with the WCW belt over his shoulder, saying, "Who are you?"
So they bought himself another whipping boy, is what you're suggesting.
We'll know very quickly. We will know very quickly. Like, the caveat here is that Cody is not coming over here for nothing. And that will ultimately tell the tale of, what we have invested in this person and what we want to get out of it. And the key is understanding where that value is. And it might very much collide with the WWE way of doing things, where we are the number one company. We just had our highest earning year ever. And we are the ones that promote this industry at its most effective way. So that will be an interesting, totally interesting handling of all this. While we have you here, Brandon, amazingly, this is only the number 2 story of the past 24 hours, and that is the expected return of one Stone Cold Steve Austin. That Fightful Sean Ross Sapp had reported on Monday night that the WWE reportedly making overtures towards Steve Austin for WrestleMania. And, I have been asking around on this, and it does seem like this is the direction for WrestleMania of Steve Austin, and based on what we have seen on television, like it looks like they have started this tease with Kevin Owens cutting promos on Texas. But this is, certainly going for the ultimate wild card here of someone that could make a meaningful difference when it comes to selling tickets over WrestleMania weekend with Steve Austin's first match in 19 years and what impact it could have on business.
Yeah, they have a lot of tickets to sell in AT&T Stadium. I think WrestleTix has it at about 47,000 tickets out for both days. They fit 80,000 in the stadium in 2016. So there's something like 60 some odd thousand tickets probably left to sell. It's a huge
and they've got to announce 200,000. So we've got to
Correct.
get to that fictional number, which that is what they are after here. And it's interesting here because this is a major card to play, and I would think if you are a fan that this is going to move tickets, you're going to want to know clearly what night is this guy wrestling on. That is the one to really track here. But I think this is the ultimate card WWE has to play.
Yeah, well, advertising in advance which night he's going to be on would require long-term planning and not changing your mind, which is something that is a challenge for WWE, or at least for one person at WWE. But no, it should help. It should help the ticket sales. It should help viewership on Peacock. I know, there's a lot of cynicism about WWE, especially when it comes to bringing back names from the past, but I do see some interest in this. I wish it was balanced with building new stars, but Steve Austin seems to like Kevin Owens, and if that's the direction that they're going to go, I'm sure he'll put in a good effort. And you guys pointed out that Andrew Thompson noticed that he had a ring on his property for a while now, so it's probably something that he's been preparing for a while. Hopefully, I remember last time he did something in the ring with Rusev, right? He ended up having torn biceps as a result. So hopefully he gets through this without injuring himself too badly. And we all know that Steve Austin's had issues with his neck, which ended his career. But it should mean improved business numbers for WWE at WrestleMania if this match really happens.
And when you look at things you mentioned the figures, if we're around the neighborhood of 47,000 out for each night, and we're looking at Austin's first match back in nearly 2 decades. Whatever impact you can get out of this Cody Rhodes news for Mania, we have Brock and Reigns, Ronda against Charlotte Flair. Johnny Knoxville's expected to be on the show. What do you expect March to be? Are you kind of bullish on them being able to really ramp up ticket sales in these final 6 weeks for the show? With a lot of things are coming together for the company. I think they're going to have a lot of momentum from all of these different factors.
I don't think these are going to be 2 sold out nights. And it's as we're learning, as at least I'm learning through watching WrestleTix do its thing, is that the capacity that they have can change a lot. But we do know, like I said, that they put in 80,700 and some odd. I found out from the Arlington Police Department, just after the event in 2016, or a year after anyway. But I would be surprised if they're able to sell, let's say, a total of 160,000 seats, even with Steve Austin. I'm not expecting that. But I do see them putting in, maybe 60,000 on each day, all said.
Yeah, I mean that's going to be ultimately the litmus test, because I don't think you can go much higher than a Steve Austin match at WrestleMania. And yeah, long term, I mean it somewhat is an indictment that we are not able to create our own stars that can move tickets at this level. But this is a year when you're heavily relying, but in the short term, this should be at least a mover for WrestleMania ticket sales. So lots of news to go through here with Brandon. So we will let you go, Brandon, but you will not be gone long, because you'll be back here with myself and David Bixenspan on Thursday. So I'm looking forward to that chat. We're going to be discussing the WWE's deal in Saudi Arabia now that we are 4 years into the 10-year agreement in Saudi Arabia. So we will be talking about some of the larger issues connected with the deal, not so much the wrestling that is going to be happening on Saturday, but I thought you and David David would be excellent people to come on. So we will be chatting with you in 2 days' time. But in the meantime, please let everyone know where they can catch more of your work. The Wrestling Industry Report that I know, I think MJ from NJ has valued at like a 5-figure fee that you could be charging for this. So maybe that's an idea for 2022.
Yeah, but yeah, I look forward to joining you on Thursday to count all $50 million that WWE will be collecting. Might be an 11-year deal now because of COVID. But anyway, yeah, you can get the Pro Wrestling Industry Report, the Wrestlenomics Pro Wrestling Industry Report, either by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Wrestlenomics, or there's a PayHip link that is on my social media at Brandon Thurston and at Wrestlenomics. Yeah, and I'll be here Thursday, and I'll be here sort of Sunday for Wrestlenomics Radio.
We look forward to it. Thank you so much, Brandon, for jumping on with us.
Thanks for having me.
From the mobile studio. That is Brandon Thurston.
Yes.
And Wai, we will just quickly go
Brandon.
through a few other news and notes here from the day, including AEW announcing the second Battle of the Belts will be happening April the 15th. They're going to do a live episode of Rampage from the Curtis Culwell Center in Garland, Texas, and then that will also feature a taping for Battle of the Belts 2. So I don't believe they have announced like the air date for Battle of the Belts 2. Last time it was on a Saturday, so maybe this will be a Friday-Saturday combo. But they are bringing back Battle of the Belts 2, and that will be happening in April, so 2 weeks after WrestleMania.
Yeah, I mean, with the way wrestling is, you could presume that this would be pretty immediate following this taping, that you'd probably get this. But sure, like adding it to a Rampage and maybe telling us a little bit about the frequency of these Saturday events. We'll see if this one feels a bit more important than the last one. You know, this close to Revolution. What are some matches we can assume? I mean, maybe some of the stories that they're building up right now will culminate then. So, yeah,
They're also running the building that 2 weeks earlier Supercard of Honor is taking place from. So ROH is running that very building on April the 1st, and then AEW is coming back 2 weeks later for the Rampage Battle of the Belts taping. So that's a very quick turnaround, although you would think the Supercard of Honor crowd is going to be more of an audience out of the state, whereas this AEW taping, you would think you're drawing mainly from people in and around the Garland area.
Yeah,
but that's been a good market for AEW in the past. SmackDown and AEW Rampage numbers from this past Friday. SmackDown did 2,231,000 viewers, up slightly from the week before, while their demo was up 10% with a 0.55, 730,000 viewers. They were mainly up in 18 to 34, up by 26%. It was their second week going against the Winter Olympics. So all things considered, I would say, given that they were going against the Olympics, also did not have any meaningful NBA competition, so that probably helped as well. But this was a good number for SmackDown, sort of at the level you would see before the Olympics, and taking that into account, the fact that they were up from the prior week was a good sign.
Seems like it, yeah. Maybe it's the added star power of having a Ronda and Brock Lesnar around. Or maybe
the Charlotte Naomi match was promoted all week, and that took up 30 minutes of the show. So that was that was notable going into the show. They did not advertise Ronda in advance, so it was not like they had necessarily set anything significantly up. They were down 19% in Canada. They actually, because of all the Olympic programming, they were outside of the top 10 among sports broadcasts in Canada with 118,000 viewers on Sportsnet 360. And then Rampage did 549,000 viewers, a 0.19 in the demo. This was actually their lowest demo figure of the year, just below the number that they did on New Year's Eve, down 6% from the past week. But they were up in 18 to 34 by 13%. Not a great number for Rampage. Viewership was almost flat with the week prior, but in men 18 to 49, they were, I believe, third for the night. So that was, a strong point for Rampage, given the fact they were going up against the Olympics. And I think it was an episode of like Gold Rush on Discovery that they were behind in men 18 to 49. So those were your numbers for the evening. And then tonight we go to NXT Vengeance Day, which will be airing on Sci-Fi. For whatever reason, they have peaked for a show that is guaranteed is not going to be at a level that they would be if they had held this off until next week.
Yeah, it's a bit perplexing. Again, I'm theorizing maybe they just want to stick to a schedule that matches the WWE main roster's premium live event schedule for whatever reason. But I mean, we look at all of these as really reps for the roster, maybe more so than the actual ratings themselves.
The main event sees Braun Breaker and Santos Escobar for the NXT Championship, and this will be, the latest test for Braun Breaker, who thus far has, passed each test that he has been placed in, and he's in there with a great talent in Santos Escobar. And as much as there's going to be the natural interest in Braun Breaker and his progression in this role, I'm also looking forward to seeing Santos Escobar in a meaningful title match that gets some time tonight. So this could be a very strong main event, I think.
Yeah, I think so. It's another test for Braun. I think and it's a different style for Braun Breaker, so we'll see how well he matches with Santos Escobar. I think, you have a veteran who's very capable of perhaps filling in a lot of the gaps that Breaker might not be able to achieve. And, I mean, in terms of interest, I can't really say I'm that interested, but it's another in the line of this Braun Breaker run that, really is ultimately for him to build himself up. So we'll see what sort of storyline implications might come out of this one, whether or not we'll have any Ciampa interaction from it, and what else.
Yeah, if Ziggler's back on the show, because that seems to be where they're going next. Carmelo Hayes and Cameron Grimes for the North American Championship. I think Hayes has been terrific during this NXT 2.0 phase of this brand. Cameron Grimes is great, so there's no reason that shouldn't be a terrific match.
I can see title change for this one. Grimes, I think, has been really, percolating pretty well with the audience, with his gimmick, and Hayes has been doing great too. So it's one I could really see them going either way with. But maybe for the sake of prolonging a feud, to give Grimes a little bit just to carry on a bit of that momentum, or to build towards a rematch, I could see a title change for this one.
The women's tag titles see Toxic Attractions, Gigi Dolan and JC Jane defend against Persha Parada and Indy Hartwell. This one could be tough. We will see.
It could be, yeah. You're talking about, some inexperience there. At least they're not doing a ladder match, right? Although, I mean, the ladder match probably turned out better than I expected. And you know what? This could very well as well.
Perhaps it will. The bar is high for these, even when it's NXT 2.0 for these specials. Pete Dunne will take on Tony D'Angelo in a weaponized steel cage match, a cage with weapons.
So I suppose every show does need to have your big gimmick match, and this seems to be it. Pete Dunne, I think you could really depend on to deliver great performances, and D'Angelo is more of a question mark. But again, in the hands of a Pete Dunne, I think they tend to be very careful with their planning of spots for this, and I think this should be okay.
And on top of that, we have the finals of the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic with MSK taking on the Creed brothers. That I think would be a great opener to the show, and I think this could be a real great breakout for the Creed brothers with MSK, who are a great tag team that don't always kind of get that focus, but. Yeah, I was very impressed with that Creed Brothers match last week with GYV, that I think this week will be that much better.
Yeah, I would honestly say I felt like last week was almost as much of a breakout performance for them as anything, but especially this week with the finals on the line, and I'm thinking the Creeds actually win it. This could be maybe at this point their definitive performance.
And who presents the trophy?
That's a great question.
Like, seriously, in the past, it's been Hunter and Regal that have typically been out there. Like, I guess you could have Sean or somebody out there.
The first year was it not Dustin and it was Cody, wasn't it? And their mother?
Yeah, they were all involved, as I recall, back during the first one.
Yeah. I mean, this year, who presents it? You're right. Regal's not there. Hunter's not there. Sean,
like they don't have that authority figure on screen that they have. Like, Sean has never been presented on camera in kind of that authority role, though he's attached to the brand.
Oh, he comes out and pulls out ladders, and matches are made. So
that's right. That's right.
We could potentially see him present this as well, or they just have the trophy lying in the middle of the ring.
That's possible too. So that's coming up tonight at 8 Eastern on Sci-Fi, airing on its regular home of Sportsnet 360 in Canada.
Hey, again, we want to thank everybody for joining us. We were up to 500 live viewers at some point, so obviously that depends on the news, of course, but thank you for everybody who managed to find us, and do subscribe, do like it to spread the word, share it. We are trying to get as many eyeballs on our shows as possible, so if you enjoy it, please do that. Or if you really enjoy us, you can always send a super chat here, live every single day, and we have a number of them today, John, and we first want to thank Brent Lockman, who sends a $5 super chat, simply to just say, just for support for days like this. Love the insight. Keep up the great work, gentlemen. Thank you so much for simply the kind words and the support.
Thank you, Brent.
We got a DJ Depression, who sends a $5 super chat, who says, imagine the heat that would be generated if Cody shows up at WrestleMania as Stardust.
Yeah, the heat would be huge. Almost as much as the heat if they just brought him in and they beat him, had Dolph Ziggler pin him right away. The heat would be huge. There's so much heat, so much potential for heat.
I mean, maybe it would be heat generated from the money being burnt, that they'd probably be paying this guy just to kind of waste his potential. I mean, it would piss off, I guess, a section of the audience, but God, to what aim, like in exchange for the potential money you could make by using the actual character that this man has built over the years instead of reverting back to the Stardust. But of course, it's very possible.
Like just go back not even that many years ago. And like this is like a perfect example, because I wouldn't say he's being booked terribly in WWE, but even like a Rey Mysterio, it's like they were able to get him, and for what is he like a meaningful game changer in any sense of the way? Whereas I think you have to compare that if he was on a New Japan roster or an AEW roster, I think Rey Mysterio would be sort of treated like this living legend that when he does wrestle, it's a major deal, and would be having matches with so many different varieties of guys. And in WWE, it's like he's in a fine role, but it's just he's another guy on the roster. And that's, I would love to be wrong here, but I think that Cody, like the biggest thing going for him will be, he is going to be a highly paid talent, and whether they view that as someone that we need to push hard. But what is their definition of pushing him the right way? Like, we have this idea that they've got the secret to get all these people over, and they just don't opt to use it. The other is like the ineffectiveness of how they believe they get stars over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very true. Yeah, it remains to be seen. It's certainly an interesting dynamic, and I have to imagine Cody himself would have been very cautious of a lot of these things, knowing exactly how he was treated the last time. So now is the point in the midst of the negotiation where he would have the leverage to be able to exactly, I don't know, maybe make some sort of guarantee that his role would be protected, or that he would have a certain level of creative control. That never really ends up well, in Vince's playground. But if he has any leverage, it would be at this point in time if he hasn't signed already.
And is Brandi like part and parcel here, like part of Cody's like coming in here, and like we talk all about Cody, but what Brandi is going to be doing?
Totally, absolutely. I mean, can you see her fitting in a role? Yeah, actually, I can. Actually, very much so in the WWE. We look at what Maurice and The Miz are as a tandem. I can see somebody bringing in Cody, wanting to bring Brandi just as a potential manager, as somebody to do mixed tag matches with. Do I see her getting in the mix like in NXT, for instance, with or even on the main roster having singles matches? Not necessarily competing for the championship, but I don't think that's really her value. Her main value to me is as a potential manager, or as a character. Jake Hughes strictly wants to ask, could this be a work? And thank you for the $5 super chat, Jake.
No.
Yeah, at this point, I think we've heard from enough sources that I trust, including yourself, John, including Brandon, including others, that I'm definitely of the belief that this probably isn't.
I mean, you could take all of this stuff and work it into stories. Like the idea of Cody one day being back in AEW is not out of the realm of possibility, like at all. This is not someone at the tail end of his career. I know he has said at a certain age he wants to get out of this, but that's always up to interpretation when it happens. That it could very well be all of this is eventually played into a story, but they are not going to this extent for a storyline.
Easy Attack sends a $15 super chat. Thank you so much for the support, Easy. He says, I actually think Vince will have more respect for Cody since AEW won the war with NXT. I think he will be higher on the card, but maybe not a main eventer. Do you think his success in AEW will have any change in how Vince sees him?
I don't know. I don't know if he is going to look at it look at, you had always heard the stories of that Vince McMahon, for all of the talk of the commentators that he would berate in their ear. It's like Jerry Lawler was never subject to that. And it was always explained that like Vince McMahon always had a great respect for Jerry Lawler because he ran his own territory and was not just someone that was just, a wrestler at the territorial level. It's like he had an ownership and viewed him as such. I don't know if he'll necessarily look at Cody in that same way. And if, Cody ultimately is, was not the architect of the Wednesday night battle. Okay. You have to give much of that to Tony Khan, but by osmosis, like maybe he will benefit in some way of a perception. Like that's what it comes down to. Does Vince McMahon see this guy as someone that is a star, or is he looking at this as the shiny toy he was able to take away from his competitor to go put in the closet for several years?
Mm-hmm. All right. Finally, we have John Kong, who sends a $5 super chat. Thank you very much for the support, John. Who asks, "What will WWE use as Cody's theme song?" So,
it's a good question. Like if it's a downstate song, then in theory, he could try and have WWE license it. Yeah.
Yeah, so much of this goes to, what we've been discussing. Will WWE try to carry over the same incarnation of Cody Rhodes, American Nightmare Cody Rhodes that we saw from AEW? Do they want a direct, transition from AEW to WWE? Or does Vince want to completely change him and repackage him into something different or something that he used to be? Could he come out to the Dash and Cody Rhodes theme song, Smoke and Mirrors? Could he, come out with... I think he'll do Stardust maybe for one night just to, I don't know, like, because it's fun. But I cannot see him making a permanent switch back to Stardust. Maybe he'll do the midway transition. Like maybe he'll walk through the portal, the NXT portal and transform, or transform mid-match. Maybe like,
the tattoo falls off.
Wow. Okay. Fantastic. Yeah. There's some potential there.
Or he comes in as Cody Theory, the older brother of Austin.
Interesting. Okay, he takes part in the Vince backstage meetings as well. But I would love to see him stick with this American Nightmare thing again. Like you're paying for the guy who, was the leader of the AEW or at least the perceived leader of AEW, and that's where he holds his most value. And I would try my best to retain the same everything: the blonde hair, the robe, the entrance, if you can. Coming out of the stage, and especially the music.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Like it's so the antithesis of how WWE has handled past situations like this, of stars that arrive as stars from a past affiliation with a competitor, that it is, well, now you're at the big leagues and you are going to be presented in our vision because we are the leaders in this industry and we know what is the best way to market someone.
Yeah, it's true. His case though is just a bit different because he has a prior relationship with Vince. He's a guy who started it in that system. So, is he going to perceive him differently than say he would a Keith Lee, or somebody else? I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. That's all for the super chats, and it's going to wrap up today's post-daily news update. So I want to thank all the people that joined us live today. We are here every weekday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Please subscribe to the channel at youtube.com/postwrestling. Give us a thumbs up. It does help with the algorithm, as I am told. And if you want to become a patron at postwrestlingcafe.com, we are always putting out extra shows each week, including tonight's Ask Away mailbag show that will be dropping for all cafe members, as we are going to go through the mailbag for this month and answer all of your questions, from Larry Hagman to explaining the background behind me and getting into many wrestling questions as well.
Yeah, if you enjoyed this section of the podcast where we strictly answer questions, you can get a full hour of it coming up tonight on this month's edition of Ask Away. So thank you to everybody who's here, and thank you everybody in the chat room, and thank you to everybody listening to us after the fact.
Up Next is live tonight at 10:15 Eastern with Braden Harrington and Davey Portman, as they will be reviewing NXT Vengeance Day, and I'm sure chatting about this news story as well. You can watch and listen live at twitch.tv/UpNextPodcast, and it will be in the Up Next podcast feed afterward. So that is it for Wai Ting. I am John Pollock. A thank you to Wrestlenomics' Brandon Thurston for joining us, and this has been your Post Daily News Update.